the biggest way in which Obama is responsible for Trump is he's black and he got elected president, and it drove 20% of the country insane. And so the status threat that presented to the white male, not every white male, but enough of them, and the white female, that generated a kind of radicalization all by itself. Now, well, not the majority of the country, but there's a kernel of Trump's, there's a racial dimension to Trump's rise. And so that's the worst thing Obama did. He was black. Couldn't help it.
Usually when I introduce these downstream interviews, I talk about some big historical shifts, some momentous political episode, and why the guest who I'm speaking to over the next hour and a half is entirely relevant, why you simply have to watch and listen. Of course, that is basically the gist of today's show as well, but I can be a little bit more brief in terms of who I'm speaking to and why. Michael Lewis is, for my money, the single best essayist and nonfiction writer in the English-speaking world today. He's written on data in baseball. He's talked about high-frequency trading. In the lead-up as well to the global financial crisis, he took a light shining it on those who benefited, who bet against the big banks when it came to the US mortgage market. That became, of course, a film, The Big Short. It even won an Oscar. More recently, he has focused on government in America and the risks posed by the Trump White House. His most recent book, or rather series of essays, Who is Government?, seeks to tell the untold story of public service, and the seemingly boring stories of those in federal government actually are rather fascinating. I can't think of many people I'd rather speak to more when it comes to Trump 2.0, the future of the United States, and the big questions we're all asking about what happens over the rest of the 2020s. Michael Lewis, welcome to Downstream.
Thank you, Aaron.
The wind, the synthetic wind from the fan is waving through your thick hair, just so people know that you're being deceived, because it's very hot in here today. So we've made an exception for you, Michael.
I appreciate you making me feel comfortable, and I hope you'll continue to make me feel comfortable as we talk.
Yeah. It is an incredibly hot day today here in London. I think it's about 25, 26, 27. I'm just going to sweat buckets. That's fine. And we've made the exception because, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, I'm sure you have people being obsequious to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're one of the finest nonfiction writers in the English-speaking language right now.
Oh, thank you.
So we thought you might as well stay cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So we're talking about this book, your newish book, not new, newish, Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service. We're going to talk about a lot of other stuff as well, but this is the hook. Briefly tell me what this is about and what drew you to writing the stories inside it.
So there's a backstory to the book. The backstory of the book is when Trump was elected the first time, the day after he was elected, he was meant to send in his transition team to learn what was going on inside the federal government. This was 550 people. Instead, he fired them. So the Obama administration had prepared these briefings for the Trump administration, the incoming administration, just so they'd understand, what was going on in the Department of Agriculture or wherever. That knowledge never got transferred. So I got interested in the federal government then. I thought it's kind of a great premise. I can wander around the federal government and get the briefings that the president should have gotten. And I'll know, and the reader will know more about the government than he does, and he's supposed to be running it. So that became a book. It's called The Fifth Risk. While I was doing that, even though the material of just what the government was doing was great, it became clear that the characters in the federal government were surprisingly great. I just couldn't believe the caliber of the person. It was so different from what I expected. I didn't know what I expected exactly, but there is this lazy stereotype of the kind of 9-to-5 passionless person. They were exquisite experts on all kinds of wild subjects, having massive consequences for the world, and didn't expect any attention or money. So I thought, if there's ever a whisper of this government being under threat again, it might be worth profiling some of these people so that the American public can't walk around with this dumb stereotype in their head. Like you're not allowed to think this about government workers without reading something about them. And so what I did was about a year ago, I recruited 6 people, writers, very different writers, and told them we're just going to parachute you into the government, find a story, whatever it is. And most of them were novelists. They were not normal journalists. One was a stand-up comedian, one was a historian. Your own John Lanchester was one of them. And they all came away with it took them a nanosecond to find it. I was right, that the stories were amazing. They all said, I can't believe this material is as good as it is. Why don't I know this? And so the 6 other writers did stories. I did about a third of the book. I did two of the long pieces, and I went back in. And the ideas were run these things. We ran them in the Washington Post once a week, and there are some of them very long. Like mine, first one is like 13,000 words, and it was just my thought was like that it will kind of inoculate the federal workforce against really stupid attacks. It didn't do it. But the book has had this tailwind because it is so clear that what's going on in the Trump administration is so destructive that it isn't just, the kind of people we're writing about are not responsible for waste, fraud, and abuse. They're sort of responsible for the society functioning, and they're all under attack.
They are extraordinary stories. I get pitched, just so people know, with regards to these kinds of books and authors, you get pitched books and you think some are really interesting, some don't look very interesting. With this, I didn't know what to think, right? Yeah. Okay, I love Michael Lewis's work. He's always done these big stories which are prominent in the media, finance, tech, like risk. I know this is kind of an appendage to your previous book, The Fifth Risk. But with this, I'm thinking essays on government. Okay. And I have to say, again, people might think I'm being obsequious. Some of the best nonfiction I've read in a really, really long time. So high value, I think precisely because I wasn't expecting these kinds of stories and like this kind of caliber of person working in public service. And I've recommended it to a ton of people. And I think the good thing with books is, you can probably get that into the hands of a Trump staffer or a lobbyist who's very much opposed to your politics. And at least it's going to get them to think, right?
Yeah.
Which they rarely do with sadly a YouTube video or a Facebook post.
Yeah.
So it has that use as well. What draws you to stories generally? You've written about baseball, you've written about finance, now you're writing about the government. What makes you think I have to write about this?
It usually doesn't start as I have to write about it. It usually starts with just some idle curiosity. I mean, it's some question. I'll give you a couple of examples. So the Big Short. I was just right before in the run-up to the financial crisis, you had all these supposedly really smart Wall Street banks collapsing because they'd made stupid bets. That starts out. How did the Wall Street firms get to be the dumb money at the table? And it leads me to the smart money, and the smart money ends up being the subject of the book. But I didn't know that existed. I didn't know the smart money existed when I went to go look into the dumb money. It starts with a question. Moneyball. How does a team with no money, a baseball team with no money, compete against teams that have 5 and 6 times the sums? If you're just thinking about baseball players as a market, the market's anything like efficient. The rich teams should just buy all the good players and beat the poor teams. That wasn't happening. Why? And then it starts that way with a kind of curiosity. And if the answer gets really interesting, I keep hanging around. And then I start thinking, at some point with all the books, it's a combination of the quality of the characters I can draw, the quality of the scenic material, the quality of the importance of the themes, all reach a certain point where I feel like, Christ, I got to write it. It's too good. In this case, this was kind of a dare almost. It was like daring myself. I have this theory that these people will make really good subjects if I just do the people. And I think I can recruit 6 writers, toss them in, and I can jump in, and we will find 7 really great subjects or 8 really great subjects. And it was beyond easy. I mean, it was true. It's always a little something different that gets me in. But it's, if you came to my office, you'd find huge piles of manila folders with loose ideas for stories. And most of them will never be executed. Most of them I'll just never pay much attention to. But every now and then something will happen to make one of them live, and I'll start to, whether it's access to the subject, whether it's meeting someone new who might enlighten me on the subject, and they just take on a life of their own, But they come in a lot of different ways, the stories, and there's no, it's funny. I think people think of writing as a career. It's not like a normal career. It's more like gold prospecting. You're looking for mines. So you're wandering around the landscape looking for veins of gold. And maybe you're going to find them, and maybe you're not. And I've been lucky enough to find some. But there's no like system to it. It's just kind of pursuing natural curiosities.
So people are going to be familiar with, you mentioned Moneyball a moment ago, The Big Short. They know those stories because they've been turned into these extraordinary Hollywood films. With regards to this book, we're at the level of speculation. They might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? So briefly, one of the stories, who is Christopher Mark?
So I'm going to back up a little bit from that. So I got these 6 writers involved, and I thought, oh, Christ, I have to go write something. I got to find someone. I hadn't even thought about that. There is an operation in Washington called the Partnership for Public Service that every year bestows awards on civil servants who've done something good. 6 awards. And every year they take nominations. So I just asked for the list of the nominees that year. I got 600 names. All of the descriptions were very impersonal. It was like, John Smith works at the FBI and broke up a child sex trafficking ring, period. But one. It said, Christopher Mark solved the problem of coal mine roofs falling in on the heads of coal miners, which has killed 50,000 American workers over the last century. And then it said, a former coal miner. So this is Christopher Mark. This is how I find him. I see his name on a list. I Google him. I get his phone number. I call him up to ask him that question, like, who are you? I'm intrigued. And I was intrigued because if you just think about that 2-line description, a story pops into your head. Like, a former coal miner solves this lethal problem. How did he get out of the coal mine? What motivated him? I assume he grew up in West Virginia and like his brother died in a roof fall, whatever it was. I thought there was some personal thing that had motivated him. So I get him on the phone. Who are you? He says, I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and my father was a professor at the university. And I went, oh, shit. This isn't going to be nearly as good as I thought. Turned out to be better. So Christopher Mark was a child of the 60s and early 70s who grew up in an upper middle class household in Princeton, New Jersey, who rebelled against his class. He rebelled against his dad. And set out after high school, even though he'd been admitted to Harvard and Princeton, to go join the working class. He goes, works in an auto factory. He works in a UPS factory. He's moving around the country working in blue collar jobs with a couple of friends till he finally ends up in a coal mine in West Virginia. The friends instantly flee because it's so frightening. He sort of takes to it. It's interesting. He then watches miners die when the roof falls. He himself almost dies twice. So when I'm on the phone with him, trying to figure out, like, is this a story? He says, I said, like, well, you rebelled against your dad. Well, who is your dad? His dad was actually a little bit of a famous guy. His name was Robert Marks. And Robert Marks had been brought to Princeton because he developed new techniques for for testing objects under stress. So the Air Force used him to test designs for planes before they built the planes to make sure the wing wasn't going to fall off. And Princeton had brought him in to test nuclear reactors they were going to build to make sure that they wouldn't crack. Robert Mark figured out when someone actually asked him, he used his techniques. He became famous when he used his techniques to analyze how Gothic cathedrals were built. The question has always been, no one knows about how the Gothic, you look at them, they're amazing. There's no records of how they were built. You walk into them, you naturally ask, like, what's holding this thing up? No one's been able to answer that question. He uses engineering techniques to figure out, like, basically how Chartres was built and what was decorative and what was structural. Becomes very famous doing this. Son rebels against the father, ends up in the middle of in a coal mine, realizes that the falling roof is the number one problem. It's the most dangerous occupation in America, and it's the cause of most of the deaths. Leaves and goes and pursues an education to figure out how to stop the problem. And the story of how he stops the problem is an amazing intellectual journey. But he's on the phone telling me all about this. And I say to him, wait, you're telling me you rebelled against your dad and you just relived your dad's career underground. He figured out what kept the roofs of Gothic cathedrals up. You figured out how to keep the roofs of coal mines up. And on the phone, he gets irritated with me. This is 20 minutes into our meeting on the phone. It's like, no, what I do has nothing to do with what my dad did. I've separated myself from that world. At that point, I thought, here's a character. He didn't, until I said this to them, he hadn't made the connection. And there was this wonderful, this wonderful revelation that comes, 2 weeks into our relationship. I fly out to Pittsburgh where he lives. We drive around coal country. He's teaching me all about what he's done. And he says, oh, and by the way, I did kind of reconcile with my dad. We wrote a paper together. And what had happened was in the early 2000s, the National Cathedral in Washington, the big cathedral that looms over the city, was showing signs of instability. One of the towers was subsiding faster than the other, and they thought, the federal government owns the thing, thought that it was going to collapse. So who do they call? They call Robert Marks. They call Christopher's dad because he's the authority on keeping the roofs of cathedrals from falling. He gets there, and he realizes the problem isn't above ground. The problem is that when they designed the thing, it was an inadequate foundation put in. So he needs his son and the work he's done underground to figure out what's going on there. And together the two figure out how to keep the National Cathedral from falling down. This is by way of answering your question, like how I get interested in writing about something. I was really interested in an expert who had solved a problem that had killed 50,000 people and solved it in a way that was going to save many future lives. I was really interested that he was in the government. No one knew who he was. No one advertised that he'd done it, and that he wasn't expecting to be paid. But I was really interested that there was this father-son story to run through it, and that there was this emotional dimension to it. And they kind of got at, like, why do these people do what they do? What's the motivation? And it's not fair that this material walked into my life. It was just a random phone call, but it's happened a lot where I had that feeling like, oh my God, I made this call to this random person who's there was a line on a sheet of paper that piqued my curiosity. And once I started picking at it, it just got more and more and more interesting. The funny coda to this is after I'd written the piece, I went for a hike with Christopher Mark and his wife, who is a psychiatrist. And she and I got separated from him. And she said, I want to just tell you this. She said that I've always thought that Chris was driven by this thing with his dad. I never had the nerve to say anything to him about it. She said, he's never wanted to acknowledge it. He's now thinking about his relationship with his dad in a whole nother way. So when I'm doing my job well, that happens. Like I can sort of start to tell the characters about themselves. That's when I know I've sort of like, I'm in a good place, a good literary place. So amazing. It's an amazing story. I mean, I just like, once you get that kind of material, you can only screw it up. I can only screw it up. But it is also kind of complicated, right? I mean, you got to learn about how coal mines are built and how you design the pillars and all that. It's there's a technical side to it. That's I always find that kind of interesting too.
So you make the technical side really accessible, but that's a perennial feature of your work. with data and analytics, etc. What you've done in this book, I think it should be impossible, which is effectively you've romanticized bureaucrats.
That's right.
You've talked about a bureaucrat there, right?
Yep.
And in a really compelling way, and I care about their interior life, their relationship with their father, but you're talking about somebody who I'm meant to hate. The culture tells me I'm meant to hate this person.
Or at the very least be bored by them.
Yeah, or indifferent. Exactly right. And certainly not worth my tax.
Right.
So in so much as you're advancing an ideology in the book, and I know you're not trying to do that, it is that of effective, competent technocracy. These people are technocrats, but they're also human beings, and they're really, really talented. If you go to the median American or the median Brit and you use those words rather than tell these kinds of stories, they don't like that ideology.
Nope.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, it's partly because the stories haven't been told. So it's partly they're getting those words, technocrat, expert, the cold words. So they aren't given access to the motives and the interior lives of the people who are doing the work. That's partly it. Because I do believe, actually, that if you put the average American in the room with Christopher Mark, they come out saying, "Thank God we have him." And not only that sense, and this jumps from between the lines of this book, all the pieces, that this person is not, he sort of found the secret to a meaningful life. That he's living not just for himself, he's found some cause greater than himself that he really cares about. And on his deathbed, Christopher Mark's not going to wonder if he should have done something else with his life. That's not like most Goldman Sachs bankers. On their deathbeds, lots of them are going to wonder what they should have done with their lives. These people know. So to answer your question, part of it is that a big part of it is that the average taxpayer never hears the story. The story is complicated, so it's hard to hear the story. It's hard to tell the story. And people are busy, they don't have time for it. What they see instead are the bad stories. It's so easy to tell the bad story. It's so easy if there's a case of corruption, or it's more commonly waste, incompetence, something goes wrong. That's an easy story to tell, and the news is sort of set up to tell those stories. So people are bombarded with those stories. The vast majority of what's going on is working. That's very hard to tell a story about that. That's why I needed good writers. I mean, good writers can do it. But the good stories are quite moving and true, and they're more, I think, more a reflection of the actual enterprise than the bad stories. Not to say that the enterprise doesn't have problems with it. I mean, one of the unfortunate byproducts of the hostility, and at least in my country, that the general public feels towards the government is that is a reluctance to invest in the government. Is a reluctance to think that, we need to help these people do their job, give them the technology they need, give them the resources they need, structure the places so that they make sense. So they are large, ossified, outdated, maddening institutions. Chris Mark is working. He would tell you that. He's working in a place that he could tell you how to fix it, but they make it harder than it should be for him to do his job. And he does it in spite of it. There are reforms that would really be helpful. Make it easier to fire people. Make it easier to hire people. Paying people, essentially market wages for expertise. Promoting people based on performance rather than tenure. Lots of that kind of stuff. So we got this kind of vicious cycle. And the vicious cycle is people don't like the government, underinvest in the government, look for bad things in the government, not good things, find the bad things they're looking for because they've underinvested. It reinforces their hostility and their cynicism, and just on it goes. The question I had is like why are we in this situation at all? And I think the one simple answer is we can afford to be that people turn to the government when there's a real crisis, when there's in times of crisis. And if you look at the United States, as screwed up as it is in many ways, we've endured a very long period of kind of basic peace and prosperity. I mean, there are always little wars. It doesn't touch the whole country. It's been a pandemic, only killed old people. Is that there isn't. I think that it would take like a massive feeling of existential risk to kick this vicious cycle into something else.
So rather than this kind of antipathy to government being an outgrowth of America's political DNA, you think it's kind of an expression of 80 years plus of prosperity
and a history of kind of unruliness and dislike of central authority and all the rest. There's a lot of other things going on, but yes, I think that our attitude towards our government is a luxury we've been able to afford.
It's a luxury belief, as the conservatives like to say.
There you go. It's a luxury belief. Yeah.
Low tax is a luxury belief, and hating bureaucracy.
Yes.
You talk about the fifth risk, and you talk about how sort of indifference, antipathy, is our major problem in terms of the crises and the risks around us today. What one risk, and you sort of hinted at that in the previous answer, because that may be the thing that generates a return to the political consent of the kind of political state we saw under, say, FDR or Clement Attlee in this country, or Lyndon Johnson in the US as well. What kind of risk are we neglecting, which could be a game changer politically? I mean, people say climate change, other people say, geopolitics.
AI.
What's the one for you as somebody who's drawn to stories and,
You mean if I had to put my money on what the crisis is, like what the...
Yeah. You used to be a trader, right?
Yeah. Money, actually, I think is the answer, or mistrust. I think, not that at any moment a pandemic could sweep over us again. These things are unpredictable. What seems inexorable and kind of predictable is that the United States is on a collision course with a kind of insolvency. And it's, so think about the financial crisis. The banks got themselves in all kinds of trouble. There's a run on the banks, a run on the financial system. If nobody intervenes, there's a depression. It's not just a little recession; it's a depression. But there was a character who could intervene plausibly: the government. Governments had the sufficient trust that they could take on the risks, that they could diffuse the crisis. Now, you can argue about whether they did it the right way or the wrong way, but they calmed everything down. Our government's now being handled in a way that soon it won't be able to calm anything down. It inflames situations financially. And Trump has made a lot of noise about, saying things like, we don't have to repay all the bonds because some of them are owned by Chinese people, that kind of thing. That he's just flirting with, we don't trust the dollar and we don't trust the Treasury anymore, creating that sentiment. And if there is a financial crisis that kind of starts with the government, there's no grown-up. There's no one to come into the room to calm it down. It becomes a completely different kind of thing. And I don't know quite how it looks. It's weird. But it'd be flights from the dollar, flights from Treasury, probably flights from the U.S. stock market, flights to gold, houses, crypto, I don't know. But if I had to bet on one, I might bet on that one. It may take a while. But we just seem incapable of running our finances. I mean, the last presidential election, nobody talked about the deficits. And Trump has just introduced a bill, his big, beautiful bill, that will increase deficits by $2.5 trillion. It's just like, the democracy seems to be incontinent, financially incontinent. And that's just going to lead somewhere bad. But that's one thing that could happen. A lot of things, you never know what the thing is going to be. The government's the mechanism for managing all of them. Yeah. And if you degrade all of the risk management, when the one comes, it's going to be worse. I mean, COVID is not a bad example this way, right? We degraded the Centers for Disease Control. I mean, there's a long history to this. I wrote a book about it called The Premonition. But we politicized it. Reagan politicized it. Took the career people who ran it and turned them into political appointees. So we had kind of stooges on top of the place when the pandemic occurs who can't stand up to the White House. They're on this very tight political leash. And, I don't know what the stats are now, and that's the way, in a way the stats are now don't matter. But like 6 months into the pandemic, the United States with 4% of the world's population had 25% of the deaths. I mean, that's appalling. We were in theory best equipped to defend ourselves, and instead we're just like poster child for ineptitude. And you say, well, I mean, in the end, COVID wasn't that big a deal. It was just 1 million deaths, whatever. But something worse could happen. And you saw in that event the degradation of our risk management. And I would have thought the response would have been to beef it up, but it hasn't been. I mean, I think we're in worse shape now to deal with that particular risk than we were before COVID happened. Now we're all set to fight each other about what you do when the disease starts. Now half the country will say, I'm not wearing a mask. No, I'm not going to distance. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm not going to vaccinate. And the other half will be infuriated because they'll be trying to do the right thing. So I'm not in the prediction business. I don't know what's the thing that's going to happen. I just know that like the whole mechanism for dealing with the portfolio of problems is less adroit than it was, in earlier times.
But you did say, and I'm not going to hold you to it because you said it's a range of this portfolio of risks, but you did start by saying that the big risk could be the US economy, treasuries, the dollar.
So the whole world, the global financial...
Elon Musk would agree with that,
Yeah,
right?
he probably would. The global financial system is built on the risklessness of the U.S. Treasury bond. It is treated as a riskless asset. It's not. It's clearly not a riskless asset, and the ratings agencies have been downgrading the United States government, and we're behaving in ways that's going to make it even riskier. And I just don't know when the United States becomes Greece. I don't know what then happens. I mean, I haven't really thought it through. Like, it's not good, but it makes. Another way of thinking about this is what we're doing is pretty dramatically increasing financial uncertainty. And when you increase financial uncertainty, you raise the cost of capital. And you raise the cost of capital, we're all poorer. So you slow an economy. And that has huge political consequences. I don't know, it's just one thought. I'm about to go back in and start writing about the Trump administration again. I'm almost certainly going to start with the Treasury. Like what they think, how they think they're going to manage this situation, how they're going to actually finance it, how they're thinking about financing the deficit. You can see it's top of mind with Trump. He's trying to talk the Federal Reserve into lowering interest rates so the interest on the debt is lower. That's not going to work, but he's thinking about it, worried about it. So that seems to me like the best way to predict the future is just look what's going on right now, and that's what's going on right now.
I hope you're enjoying this interview. Michael Lewis is a sensational writer, great person to talk to. If you are enjoying it, and if you want to support our work, you know what to do. There's a link in the description below, novaramedia.com/support. Help us build a new media for different politics. We don't just have these kinds of conversation on Downstream. We have a daily show, we have articles, we have podcasts, we have social first content. We make all of that because our mission here at Novara is to build a new media for a different kind of politics, both at home and abroad. Help us get there. Give us as little as £1 a month. Support our work. Help shift the conversation in a better, more thoughtful direction. Go to novaramedia.com/support. I mean, what I find really extraordinary is you have you have some people in the US actually saying we shouldn't be the global reserve currency. That has a load of downsides. In terms of interest rates domestically, it's only accounts for about 0.25, 0.5% maybe. Mm-hmm. And the downsides are quite large. Alongside that, you have what seems to me like a really poor quality of debate around things like immigration. I see, look, I don't like to be one of those people that says, I saw on X, right? Because obviously, social media, least of all X, is not reality. But I repeatedly see and encounter also in the sort of American podcast space, people saying things like workers in Silicon Valley should just be US nationals, or as they like to say, heritage Americans. They shouldn't be migrants. And I'm thinking, you wouldn't have deep learning, which is the basis of AI in terms of where it's going now, without Jeffrey Hinton, British, Yann LeCun, French, Demis Hassabis, British, you can go further and further back. You wouldn't have the Apollo.
No, it's all dumb. Yeah, no, this
Without Werner von Braun.
No,
I know, but why is the quality of the American conversation on stuff like that so dumb? Like, there's just so little nuance. You could have a really radical position, which you and I would disagree with, but at least it's like internally coherent. Why is it so dumb?
Because we're so dumb.
Why
are we so dumb?
Has that changed?
It's been democratized is the problem, right? The debate, everybody has an opinion and everybody's opinion is the same. So that the country's harder to lead. We aren't delegating to our representatives lots of the same kind of responsibility as before. So I think that's partly it. But it's dumber because more means worse. More people participating in the debate means the debate's worse. Everybody gets to have a say. That may be one thing. So when I think about the immigration debate, such as it is, it's a bit like the discussion around trans people, or in fact, for that matter, the discussion around the federal workforce. It's filled with anger. Like that these people who we're talking about, immigrants, trans people, federal workers, for whatever reason, the society has agreed it's okay to ostracize them, and they've become legitimate targets of anger. So it's right from the start. The conversations around them are not rational. Now, why is it with immigrants? Isn't it probably that's probably true everywhere, right? They're outsiders. Sometimes they look different. Americans feel less secure. Average Americans. They're looking for their anger. The question is where the anger comes from. But anger is definitely the emotion of the age. Anger is what Trump stokes. So you have an angry conversation rather than a sane and sort of efficient one. But you're absolutely right. Like the country is a country of immigrants. That's the weird thing, right? We are the country that's built entirely on immigration. I'm an immigrant. They came in the 18th century, but still, there's a hypocrisy to the whole thing. The idea that you just kind of lift up the drawbridge and we'll keep this for ourselves is sort of antithetical to the country. So you're asking me a question I don't know the answer to. I don't get the anger. I don't completely get it.
Is that because you've won you're one of the people that's won proverbial out of the last 40 years? Like you said, anger is the disposition of the age. When did that start? When did that shift happen, do you think?
So I think the financial crisis had a really big effect on the politics of the country, the tone of the country. And it was this event where it became clear to everybody the story we were telling ourselves about ourselves wasn't true. That the elites played by different rules than everybody else. It was capitalism for everybody, which is pretty brutal. If you work at McDonald's, you're on the receiving end of capitalist forces. But if you work at a fancy financial firm, you're not. You get bailed out. If you screw up, you get bailed out. Those feelings of unfairness that gave rise to were very powerful. And it took the form of the Tea Party on the right and Occupy Wall Street on the left, and it polarized the politics. So when I think about the state of our country, like the emotional state of politics, I can't get out of my head two social science experiments that I've run across in the last decade. And they're both illustrating the effects of unfairness. Do you know who Franz de Waal is?
No.
He did work with chimpanzees, with capuchin monkeys. And he did this, you can go on YouTube, it's hysterical. He puts two monkeys in side by side in two cages, but they can see each other. And he gives them a simple task. And like the task is, he hands the monkey a little rock, and the monkey puts the rock in a little jar. And when the monkey does that, he's given a treat. And the treat is a piece of cucumber, which is like an inferior treat, but it's enough of a treat. And he'll do it all day, just for the cucumber. He'll do the task all day. The experimenter, then takes one of the monkeys, and instead of giving him cucumber, gives him a grape, which is like much tastier. It takes 2 cycles of this before the first monkey, who's getting just the cucumber, flips out. The second time that the first monkey gets a cucumber and he's seen the other monkey get a grape for the same job, he takes a cucumber and throws it back at the experimenter. And then he starts beating the cage. And it really is just like even monkeys perceive unfairness and they get outraged. This is what happened in the financial crisis. It was like the bankers get a grape and I get a cucumber. So even if you were, you tell the American people that we bailed them out because we needed to bail you out too. That if we didn't bail them out, it'd be even worse for you. And even if it was, on the whole, better for the average American, they see the unfairness, and they care more about the unfairness than the absolute levels, the inequality than the absolute levels. And we live in a society that's increasingly unfair. The second experiment, and you just stop me if you don't want me to go on.
This is great. Now go on, please.
The second experiment is the other side of the unfairness. What happens to people when they're on the pleasant side of unfairness, when they're getting the grape? And it was actually a friend of mine conducted this experiment. He brought in undergraduates. He taught college. And he divided them in groups of 3 and appointed it totally arbitrarily, one of the 3 people, the leader of the group, and then gave them a problem to solve. And they thought this was what they thought that they were here to solve, like cheating, how to prevent cheating and academic cheating on campus, or what to do about sexual abuse on campus. And they're having this 2-hour conversation about it. An hour into it, the researcher brings a plate of cookies into the room. There are 3 people. He brings 4 cookies. Everybody gets a cookie. And then invariably, the person who's arbitrarily been appointed the head of the group just takes the 4th cookie because the privilege. This is what's happening. Elon Musk takes the 4th cookie. Jeff Bezos takes the 4th cookie. Donald Trump takes the 4th cookie. There's a kind of randomness to outcomes, but once the unequal outcomes are established, people on either side of the unequal outcomes go kind of crazy. The people who are screwed are furious. The people who are blessed are oppressive, overbearing, and takey, grabby. Starting there, this just gets worse and worse and worse. The selfishness of the people who are on the right end of inequality just inflames the outrage of the people who are on the wrong end. I think that we're kind of there. The great mystery, if I were you interviewing me, I'd say, like, how the hell did such a country elect, a billionaire real estate developer to solve the problems of the people who are being treated unfairly? And that's the mystery of Donald Trump. His ability to genuinely be angry and be a kind of conduit of grievances, and to stoke the grievances and to satisfy the anger in cheap ways really speaks to the person who feels like they've been treated unfairly. And the people who feel they've been treated unfairly often are right to feel they've been treated unfairly. What's weird is they look to Donald Trump as a cure or a solution. But that's his talent. It's like dealing with the monkey who's pissed. Like all the monkeys in America are hurling the cucumber back at the researcher, and Donald Trump comes in and organizes them to go attack the monkey with the grape or the researcher.
I'm sympathetic to that. But somebody watching this who's more amenable to Trump or to the right, who might not still like the guy, but they're more amenable than you are, they might say, you know what, that's all true. I actually agree with the conclusion there. But at the same time, Trump and America First have isolated really three things which resonate with American workers, which gets them over the line in the states that matter, particularly in 2016, let's say this time. Trade policy and its failures. Not to say what he's then proceeded to do is correct, but trade policy and its failures. Immigration policy and its failures. Again, that doesn't mean you agree with everything he's subsequently done. And an end to failed foreign policy.
Wars.
Post-USSR. Yeah, right, since the end of the Cold War. And he managed to say the right things at the right times to the right people on those 3 issues, and that gets him over the line. Do you think that matters? And do you think that is an indictment of American progressives? Or do you just think that actually, no, that's bullshit? Trump is an expression of a broken political culture, and we shouldn't be trying to look at it through this kind of quite complex analytical lens.
I think if Trump had plausible solutions to the problems everybody's angry about, I'd buy the line that that's why he's elected. He doesn't have plausible solutions to the problems. He just shouts about the problems. In fact, he often undermines the plausible solutions to the problems. So I'm much more inclined to think the second. He's an expression of a broken political system and a weird media environment too, or new media environment. So it's true. You pointed to things that inflame people. Those subjects inflame people, but he has not actually done much to fix the problem. And so I think his success is much more due to this kind of dog whistle about anger, outrage, grievances, and that he speaks to those feelings in people. He touches those people that way. And they're not, it's also interesting how his relationship to people's attention. He's not, people listen to Obama give an hour-long speech. People read my books for hours. It's one kind of attention, right? People will really attend. Trump is like coming into a room and farting. That's how he gets attention. Comes in a room and sets off a foghorn. And it's crude, got the attention, not keep the attention. And he's right now in our country, the strategy of just repeatedly just getting people's attention rather than keeping people's attention is a really smart political strategy. I don't know why, but it works. It's sort of like you dominate the news cycle. People can't look away, that kind of thing. He's always been the best at that. He was best at that in the 1980s. It was just, that was a less powerful ability. This ability to be kind of a spectacle all the time, without any ability to actually hold an audience. His rallies were famous for people would come and be all worked up and he'd say some outrageous things and then he'd start to drone on and people would start to leave because he wasn't that interesting. And that's another one of the weird things about not just Trump, but Musk, how kind of uninteresting they are. I don't know how much time you spend reading Elon Musk's tweets, but I feel like I keep waiting for him to say something that makes me think, oh, this is a very smart man. Yeah. And instead I feel like I'm watching the guy at the party with a lampshade on his head. It's like, oh, look at me. I'm life of the party. There's an inanity to it. And for whatever reason, it works now. That approach to the population works now. I don't believe it's going to always work. I think it's there's something about now, the way the media is now.
Getting attention is definitely what he's good at, but I also sometimes think he has an ability to capture dysfunction and offer an analysis through quite memorable means like anecdotes and so on. I remember one, for instance, when he was on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, which is kind of, emblematic.
You're talking about Musk now?
No, Trump.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. Elon Musk is I completely agree. He's like the dumbest smart guy in history. But yeah, Trump was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he says he was flying into, I think, Kandahar airport, and the pilot and the people on the military, plane say we have to turn off all the lights. And he says, hold on, we've spent trillions of dollars to pacify this country, and you're telling me that the president of the United States can fly into Afghanistan, and I can't even have the light on. And I thought, look, I don't think he's the brightest guy in the world, but that's a really powerful, really powerful line. And you even step back and you go, Christ, he's right.
Yep.
And I feel like progressives have, and I'm not attack progressives and Democrats and the left because of Trump, because I agree with most of what you're saying, but I do also feel that apart from maybe Bernie Sanders, there just hasn't, and of course Obama, there hasn't been a Democratic politician just capable of speaking in just a normal register in ways that people can understand. Could Kamala Harris say something that sort of sensible and common sense? And I don't like to use the word common sense with Trump, but it's kind of true.
Right. There's a street smarts.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a street smarts.
So I suppose what I'm asking is, do you think that the Democrats are implicated in this? Because I was speaking to Joseph Stiglitz a couple of weeks ago. Lovely man, Nobel Prize winner. And he says, I partly blame Obama for Trump and the two Obama presidencies.
All right.
The people
That's become a very fashionable thing to say.
Well, quite. And, there's loads of comments on our YouTube channel saying that. But he said, look, I was on the call in '08 when you had Tim Guyton, you had the people from the banks. And I said, look, we have to look after American laborers. Otherwise, we are in big trouble.
Yeah.
And he said to me, we didn't.
Well, they rescued the auto companies. Their argument for rescuing the banks was if you didn't rescue the banks, the ordinary person was the person who was going to be totally screwed. It wasn't that they weren't actually sympathetic towards the bankers. They felt that the bankers kind of had them in a bad place. I disagreed at the time. So I thought the shareholders should be wiped out. The banks, I always thought maybe nationalize the banking system for a stretch. There had to be. Obama's phrase was, we don't need Old Testament justice. But in fact, we did need Old Testament justice. That it felt so unfair. But they were actually doing things. They did a lot of things for the ordinary worker. They just didn't explain it very well. I think that's true. But do I think Obama, if you ask me to make the case, Obama's responsible for Trump.
Partly responsible.
Partly responsible.
It's not monocausal, obviously.
So I would say the biggest way in which Obama is responsible for Trump is he's black and he got elected president, and it drove 20% of the country insane. And so the status threat that presented to the white male, not every white male, but enough of them, and the white female, that generated a kind of radicalization all by itself. Now, well, not the majority of the country, but there's a kernel of Trump's, there's a racial dimension to Trump's rise. And so that's the worst thing Obama did. He was black. Couldn't help it. So that's the biggest contribution Trump made. I think also there might be some truth to the roasting he gave Trump at the White House Correspondents Association dinner being a kind of motive for Trump to get out there. I think the funny thing about Trump, people forget this. There's no way he thought he was going to win. He didn't plan to win. He ran his first campaign, not the second one, the first one, as a marketing enterprise. It was not about becoming president. It was like watching the dog catch the car. Like the dog chases the car and never catches the car. This time the dog ran into the back of the car, and the dog caught the car. So it's possible that if Obama could have personally managed, if he thought that Trump was a serious threat, he could have personally massaged him into a different place where he never would have felt the need to go do such a thing. But the idea that like Obama's policies were obviously inflaming.
I don't think Joe Stiglitz would say the policies. I would say it's more about the opportunity cost. What didn't you do after?
Yeah, that's true.
Rather than what he did do. I don't think he's going to say Obamacare is why Trump happens. Right?
In retrospect, if you're going to rerun the Obama administration, one of the things at the top of the list you would do is throw huge sums of money and lots of advertising along with the money saying you're doing it at rural America.
Yeah.
Rural America is the source of Trump's power, and they shouldn't feel stiffed. They're heavily subsidized, but they feel stiffed. And if you wanted to sort of turn down the heat in rural America, you could have done that. But again, it's very easy to say all this in hindsight. At the time, you're sort of like you're making battlefield decisions, and I never felt that anything Obama did was unreasonable. I could disagree with it, but I see why he did it, and it was. I thought he played his hand pretty well for the most part. But I'm also aware that this is what people are saying about him, and I don't completely buy it. I think that aside from the kind of racial stuff that naturally got inflamed when a black man was elected president, that there's not much that was obvious to do that would have prevented the rise of a Donald Trump-like character.
And what do you make of J.D. Vance? You're saying that Trump is very much an expression of the moment. What he's good at is probably time limited. J.D. Vance is something else, or no?
It's something else. More cynical. Trump is deeply cynical too, but there's the way in which Donald Trump lies so much that when he tells the truth, it's like the mistake that he just everything is a lie. If you sit and listen to it, like so much of it is just a lie. But I think he believes it. It's like the con man. The best con man believes his own con. I don't think J.D. Vance completely believes his own con. J.D. Vance is very capable of getting on television and just lying, making stuff up. And he's smarter than that. So I think he's more cynical. I think he thinks he's playing a hand cleverly. And Trump is just, he's the bull in the china shop. He's just being Trump. And I think people pick up that difference. I don't think, if Trump vanished tomorrow, I don't think Trumpism survives.
That's interesting.
I think that nobody speaks to his audience the way he does. I don't think anybody can just pick it up and run with it. And I don't think J.D. Vance can. So I could be wrong. But he's obviously a very clever guy. Pretty good writer. Okay. For a politician. I've got his book. I haven't read The Hillbilly Elegy. I read the first few pages just to see if it was even readable. But I just think, the people will smell a rat. So anyway, what do I make of him? He's played his hand very well so far.
You don't think he could be the president, that Trump is kind of like a John the Baptist figure for?
Anything could happen.
Anything could happen.
But if you're asking me to handicap it, I'd probably bet against it given the odds the market would currently put on it. The market would probably say there's a 40% chance that J.D. Vance will be a president of the United States. What do you think about that? 35%?
Well, I mean, the fact that Trump's only doing one term kind of, as far as we know.
Yeah, as far as we know. But so if there was the betting markets, there's an answer to this question.
Yeah.
There'll be betting markets on this. I suspect my view is dimmer, of his future is dimmer than the betting markets. Just because I don't think he'll play once he has to be the leader. It will come across completely differently. He's not rich, He didn't make his fortune. He's not a star, kind of thing.
Yeah, history is littered with these politicians who are really puffed up, in that more junior role in this country. If you think of Anthony Eden.
Yep.
He was the foreign secretary of this country during the Second World War, and probably the best looking prime minister this country had, very well dressed, and he was a complete disaster as PM. So I think there's some wisdom to that. I was speaking to Karen Howe a week ago. She's written this great new book about AI, Empire of AI.
Yep.
Sam Altman, Elon Musk. And I asked her a question. We've had 20 years of big tech, and it's obviously had these hugely destructive consequences for civil society, politics, etc., as well as some good things. And I said, if the next 20 years are as bad with AI as the last 20 years have been with big tech, do you think American democracy survives? And she said no. So I want to put that same question to you.
Oh, I have no idea. But I would have thought the question would be, if the next 20 years with AI are as bad as the last 20 years with big tech have been, are there human beings on the planet, right? Isn't that the question? Like, there's not democracy that's at stake. It's like the existence of humanity. I don't know if I believe any of that, but that's with AI. People are saying that, right? 1 in 5 chance of an extinction event. I don't quite understand how it all works. I gotta say, I'm not my only literary encounter or flirtation with AI was a dinner I had with Sam Altman a year and a half ago.
Oh, great. Go on.
At his house. And he was interested in talking about, I wanted to talk to him about Sam Bankman-Fried. And I quite liked him. It was fun to talk to. And he was interested in knowing who should write his biography because he was being assaulted by 74 different journalists at once. And he just wanted to get it out of the way. Like, which of these people? And I said to him, why are you having a person write your biography? If your machine is so smart, it should write your biography. And he said, it's not that smart. He said it would be a really bad book. I said, well, that tells me something about your machine. When will it be smarter? And he said 18 months, maybe. And I actually said to him, I would write that book. I mean, edit it. Write a parallel book. Like, let me come in, do what I do with you. We'll toss all of your, Slack channel stuff and emails and whatever and your biography into the machine, and it can do its thing. And I can write a biography of both you and it. Like, we can see how it can think and how it can't think. Because my view of it is that this isn't one thing called intelligence. The intelligence is very complicated. This machine is able to do some things well, and I think other things it will never do well. And I'm skeptical. And he said, maybe. So maybe I'll do that, and maybe I'll have something to say about AI that's interesting. I plugged into Chat GPT, whatever, the prompt, write me the first chapter of a book by Michael Lewis on Sam Bankman-Fried. It was so bad. I mean,
When was this?
a year and a half ago.
It could be a lot better now, right?
I
Version
guess.
4?
Yeah, I guess it could be better, but it was weirdly bad. So there's a part of me that's bloody minded. It's not informed, that wants to take the position that this is all way overblown, and that no, we're not going to be wiped out by AI, and no, in fact, it's not going to like dramatically change our lives for the worst. That it was going to do is a lot of boring jobs, and so a lot of boring jobs won't exist, and then it creates certain social problems, but also social opportunities. Really nice not to have a lot of boring jobs. I assume it's a tool that will be used, and that a lot of the noise around it is hyperbole for the sake of raising money. And in fact, it's kind of great. The only moment that's really, there have been a couple of obviously dramatic moments in the recent history of AI, but the one that really caught my attention was DeepSeek. It was like, oh, whoa. They did it with like $1 million and 3 Chinese engineers. Why do we need $74 billion to do this? I thought that was great. I mean, nobody's been dwelling on this, like why you need the massive investments that are being made by these American tech companies when like this fly-by-night operation in China was able to generate superior results with very little.
I mean, that's a very Michael Lewis coded story, the idea of a hedge fund guy, in his part-time putting together an AI.
For completely different reasons, right?
Yeah.
To just predict the market or whatever he was doing.
Yeah. Okay, my final question, because you didn't give me the blockbuster answer. No, American democracy can't survive the next.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I would never. I think the one bet I would be very reluctant ever to make is the end of American democracy.
But can I just say, because in the book you talk about America as an enlightenment, or the essays, I think actually it's John Lanchester, talks about America as an enlightenment project and the kind of accumulation of data around this index of inflation, CPI is one of the essays. Great essay. Is, maybe the apotheosis of enlightenment thinking, and America is moving away potentially from enlightenment thinking, and we're moving towards a post-enlightenment world.
Mm-hmm.
And, ergo, in a post-enlightenment world, that kind of polity, which has been around since the 1770s, with all of its imperfections, is kind of listless, and it's out of time. It's out of time. It's out of touch with the zeitgeist. You don't buy that then?
Mm-mm. I mean, I think I live in a very strange country that has a remarkable capacity for reinvention and pretty deep narratives about its own democracy, and is really not an obvious candidate for an autocracy. It's a 350 million unruly people, many of them heavily armed. They are, and they don't like being told what to do. I also think, I mean, this is just anecdotal. I travel around the country a lot. I meet with lots of different kinds of people. Our politics is so different from our culture that the way our political life right now does not rhyme with like what it's like to be in an American town, what it's like to be in an American conference, what it's like to be in an American sporting event. It's like the rest of the society seems disconnected from the politics. And I just assume the politics is going to have to come around and serve that it will hit a point where the people demand sort of more intelligent politics. I have a hard time betting against the country. It's just, among other things, it's just so successful. I mean, it fails in many ways, but it's like this, just been this engine for wealth creation that the world, like no other the world has ever seen. And it's not like, I don't know, Nazi Germany or Weimar Germany. It's not like they're their problems, but they're small problems kind of compared to the problems it could have. And I just don't know. My gut says bet on it, not against it.
Michael Lewis, great place to end. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.